Hello, I'm Rebecca the Maths Lady, here to help you become a fabulous primary maths teacher so that all your children become fluent, creative and confident with their maths. Now at this point in this video, I need to stop to acknowledge that this is late March 2020. So suddenly the world of primary education has completely changed and nobody knows yet how long that's going to be for or precisely what that means. I am going to do my best to continue with this series and it will relate to classroom teaching. I will try to do some other things with my channel as well during the school closures, but I will try to keep this series going for teachers as classroom teachers, publishing an episode each week so that when you go back to school, this series will be there to help you hit the ground running and really enjoy going back to your classroom teaching. Now this is episode 13, the final episode in the series for teachers of year 1 of children who are 5 or 5 to 6 years old. The first 12 episodes covered the maths content and how to teach it and the expert questioning strategies that will really help you change children's lives for the better. In this final core episode, episode 13, I'm going to talk about managing people in maths education in year 1. Managing your classes and managing your children with your TA if you've got one, working with your managers effectively, working with parents and looking after yourself. So at the beginning of this course, I explained there are really 2 ways to be an expert teacher. You may choose to stick with a pre-written scheme of work with detailed lesson plans, but understand how to innovate around it and adapt when you can see how things could be better. Or you may choose to put that aside and write your own schemes directly from the curriculum. I'm going to talk about the first situation first, where you've got a detailed scheme of work in place and you're just evolving it. And of course, in that situation, the main aspects of your classroom dynamics, what's going on, who's doing what when, are dictated by that scheme of work. Here are 5 ways in which this video course can help you do more than just blindly follow the scheme of work. The first is that you can really hit the ground running. You can watch this series in its entirety in 2 or 3 hours before you go into the classroom and really have a deep understanding of the maths you're going to be teaching, the essential elements of it and the kinds of learning journeys your children are going to be taking. The second takeaway is an understanding of the structure of the numbers to 20 as 5s and 1s. I would expect them to be in your scheme of work if it's a good scheme of work. They might be in as 10 frames, they might be in another form. You need to hone in on why that structure is so important. You want to translate it with the children from however it's given in the scheme of work into fingers and toes. You need to get them instantly recognising numbers to 20 as 5s and 1s. And here's a link to that crucial episode. Your third takeaway is that I would expect this course to help you to intervene more effectively in lesson time if a child is struggling, because you've got a deeper understanding of the learning journeys they may be failing to take and what the particular things that you can do are that will make a difference. Fourth takeaway, I hope you'll pick up some of the expert questioning strategies. Tell me a story about this number sentence and another one. Number talks. Pick one, really go for it. It'll make a difference. It'll give your classroom a lift and it should be compatible with whichever scheme you're using. And number 5, and this is more relevant now than ever, if you have chaotic times in school, if there's a lot of sickness, if there's school closures, you're going to be more confident and able to adapt your scheme, to hone in on the aspects of it that really matter, to teach it in ways that children can access even if they've missed quite a lot of school. So now let's talk about what happens if you want to put your pre-written scheme aside altogether and build your own teaching plan straight from the national curriculum. And just a reminder, if you haven't noticed already, there are term per page guides to help you get going with doing that in the Facebook group, which throughout this series I've referred to as the Expert Primary Maths Teacher Planning Group, but I'm going to change its name to the Expert Primary Maths Teaching Group. And once again, what you see going on in classrooms really varies from school to school. I'll try and describe it, but part of the point of this is that you can interpret it in any way you like and build the classroom culture and the teaching culture and the school culture around it that you want, because you deeply understand the essence of what you're trying to do. But there are some predictable things. If you've got a multi-stream school, then innovation tends to be slower, but you've got the benefit of several classroom teachers talking to each other and becoming really confident in explaining and justifying what they're doing, which is such a powerful thing for teachers to be able to do. In schools like this, the lessons are generally good to go lessons. There are some exceptions when you're doing cross-curricular work or topics that are better taught in different ways, but a good to go lesson structure is very common. So what's a good to go lesson structure? Well, you start with a quick warm-up for fluency. So in year 1, that could be quick number recognition, one more, one less. You can bring your feet into that. Then some whole class teaching, which hopefully would involve a higher level questioning strategy, but focusing on a particular point. Then you've set up some practice work, and the children who say they're ready to go and do their practice work can go and do that, while children who are not so confident stay with teacher support. In a lot of classrooms, you've got a teaching assistant as well, who's floating around, keeping an eye on what's going on. Quick classroom organisation strategy. It's very useful to have 3 encouragement stamps, ideally colour coded, so you can see them from across the classroom. Here's an example. And you and your teaching assistant both know the first stamp would mean, I've had to help this child, they're having a go now, but we need to keep an eye on them. Second stamp would mean, I've checked this child's work, they know what they're doing, they're getting on with it. And the third one would mean, they have completed all the practice that we were expecting them to do. This child has understood what we're trying to do and they have proved it. And when they've completed the practice, there's something that they can wear which will denote, make it clear to everyone that they have achieved the core element of this maths lesson. And they are now ready to help other children if they need help. That's quite a challenge in year 1. It needs a lot of supervision and help to get them there. Or to move on to another activity, which may be a related activity, a similar activity in a different context, or something cross-curricular, or it could be moving on into another part of the day's learning. In these classrooms, there are some wonderful pedagogical strategies. There's often a puzzled, cuddly toy who keeps getting things wrong and the children have to correct them. There can be a lolly sticks technique where if you ask a question, you pull the lolly stick out at random so nobody knows who's going to get asked. So those classrooms often don't look so very different from classrooms where teachers are following an externally written detailed scheme of work to an outsider. But those teachers are constantly reflecting on what they're doing and improving it. And they're all able to justify why they're doing what they're doing all the time. Now, where you've got single stream teaching or smaller schools than that, innovation happens much more quickly because in general, it's very hard for there to be anybody else who is keeping detailed track on what the individual teacher is doing. And this is where teachers really start to have a lot of fun very quickly. Some teachers teach with continuous provision. They never teach a whole class. They do that because they know that some children struggle to sit still and work in a whole class environment, and they've seen the benefits of continuous provision and they can just do it. So why would they do anything else? Some teachers are following an outdoor strategy. Some are using daily routines where they do a little bit of practice for fluency, like with your 5s and 1s. And then their maths teaching is much more blocked and integrated across the curriculum. So they may have days when they don't do maths, and then they may have a day when they do maths all day. They do a topic and it's integrated into art and PE and it flows. And the teaching becomes so powerful and deeply connected and efficient because the children are saturated and totally immersed in the topics they're doing. And what about if you're teaching a mixed year class? Well, mixed year teaching is incredibly powerful because if you structure it properly, the children all spend time being an apprentice, watching what's going on, watching higher level maths, getting a general appreciation of it without being tested or expected to have totally mastered it. And then when they revisit it the following year, they'll come to understand it more quickly because they've already had it primed, and they will have to explain it to the younger children. They are the masters now. So every child in the class has a chance to be an apprentice and a master. You don't get stuck in a rut where some of the children identify as being great at maths and others are always the followers. It rotates through. Every child does both. And that is so powerful. And it's done in the ways that really play to the strengths of mixed year teaching. In the Year 2 course, which I'll video next, you'll see how the topics really fit together well for Year 1-2 teaching, and other years can combine as well. When you teach with apparatus, the younger children are always getting something from that, even if they haven't completely mastered it yet. So that's the section about working with your classes. Now, I said I'd talk about working with your managers. In recent years, maths teaching has become very top-down run. Generally, the maths teaching that's going on in primary classrooms is dictated by the external scheme, which is chosen by the numeracy coordinator and the head teacher. And teachers have very little control of what they do. At best, this is because you've got a really excellent scheme that's working brilliantly in your school, so they want to stick with it. Generally, it's because of a culture of fear, because of the threat of inspectors coming in and labelling your school as a failure, and it's best to have an external scheme of work in place. At worst, it's because you've got a controlling manager who just likes to dictate what you do, but that's really, really rare. In general, I recommend a nudge culture is a really good way to work. I listed 5 ways earlier in which you can boost your performance as a teacher by using the recommendations in these videos in ways that complement any externally written scheme of work. So it's a really great idea just to make alterations in your classroom that you can make as tiny tweaks without anyone really noticing or feeling threatened by them. And then after you've made those changes and they've worked and really improved things for your children, you should take the time to tell people what you did in the context of those great outcomes. Then you can build their confidence in you, and over time you can make a few more innovations and a few more suggestions. As I said before, if you're in a smaller school, you can nudge much more quickly. It's harder in bigger schools, but you have the benefit of having the conversation with your peers, your fellow year group teachers. But one of the purposes of these videos is to give expert maths teaching a voice. It's not had one in England for 10 years now. All the training, all the government finance training and all the emails to schools have been about implementing externally written schemes of work. The teachers who've been writing their own straight from the curriculum have had no support and have had no voice. And these videos give you and that idea of writing schemes straight from the curriculum a voice, a clear rationale, a reference point, where if you've got a head teacher or a numeracy coordinator who's really listening to you, you can say, I want to do this from this series of videos. Here's a link. What do you think? So I hope you find that useful. Okay, what about working with parents? Well, most of the teaching really goes on in your classroom. Parents don't need to do a lot. You need your parents to read with their children. That's the big focus in Year 1, establishing good habits. Beyond that, you want to give them challenges where they're going to experience success. It's going to be fun with their children. They're going to feel they're contributing. I hugely recommend encouraging them to play games like these ones, games that only take 5 or 10 minutes, maybe even just once a week. Maybe before Christmas you could send home a letter suggesting that these are really great for number development. If you set other tasks, make them fun, like looking for shapes or talking about the numbers to 100. Can a parent and child say the numbers to 100 taking turns? Or make them tasks that are there to help specific children in ways that are relevant to them. Maybe because they've missed a chunk of teaching and they're trying to catch up, or because they're struggling in a specific way. Of course, if your school has a policy of setting numeracy homework in Year 1, then you're going to have to set some. But make it fun, make it easy, give everyone a sense of success. Okay, finally, what about the stresses of yourself in teaching in this way? Well, I've explained before that expert teaching leads to great efficiencies. You teach in more powerful ways that lay more secure foundations for the future. And you save time. So why isn't it the case that all expert maths teachers are super relaxed and super happy? Well, it's because you begin to see more about your children. As you slow down and ask expert questions that get the children to unpack their thinking and explain it to you, as you become more observational, watching their work and pondering and thinking how to teach, you start to see things that you didn't see before about your children. And it just leads you to wanting to do more, to see more of the challenges they are facing and to help them to learn how to overcome them. So your work expands to be more fulfilling but still very challenging. And that extra level of challenge brings new stresses. But they are hugely rewarding stresses. It's just not stress-free. And there's also a problem in that as you become an expert teacher, you become a wise old crone or a bit of a wizard. And without ever meaning to, you can be quite threatening to teachers who have to manage you and who do not understand what it is you know. They haven't mapped out a lot of the domains that you've come to understand about what matters in teaching and in raising children. And that can be really stressful too. If you've got a manager who's like that, but can talk about it, you can have an honest conversation about those stresses between you, then you'll be okay. I should also say that if you're an expert teacher, perhaps you should be thinking about leadership and management roles yourself, if you don't want to be managed by people who don't understand what you understand. And if you don't like what's going on in policy at national level, perhaps you could encourage people you know and trust, maybe teachers who are coming out of teaching, retiring, or leaving the profession for other reasons, to enter politics. But that's another story. Two last things before I leave the Core Year 1 series. If there are things you'd like to say about Year 1 maths teaching that I haven't covered, please contact me. We can make a collaborative video. Second thing is, don't forget the motor sensory integration video. If your children are really struggling to sit still, and you think they're struggling to take information in, that video is well worth watching because it goes into the exercises you can use to identify those problems and some of the interventions you can use. And thank you so much for joining me for the Year 1 series. Sorry it hasn't always been as succinct or as brilliantly presented as I would have loved it to have been. I've done all this on my own and I'm no technical wizard, as you can see. I'll be back next week with the first video in the series for teaching Year 2 maths, and at some stage in the next few weeks I'm expecting to launch some YouTubing services for parents whose kids are really struggling with maths and they're home teaching and they're not able to cope and they want some help. So that you might find those interesting too. In the meantime, please do everything you can to stay safe and well. If you're one of the teachers who's still teaching key workers children in school, thank you. I hope you manage to enjoy the pause at times so that you're ready to enjoy your teaching when you go back to it. Bye for now.